Hey everybody, Jeff Helvin here with Lori Ballen and Ballen Brands at your command. Today I wanted to do a little review on tags within the command, the agent KW command system. There's a lot of different discussion, a lot of confusion on tags. How do we use them? How do we keep them up to date? Which ones are already in there, so forth. So what I wanted to do is kind of give a little overview of how we look at it. Tags is definitely an organizational structure of sorts, and well, not all of us work that way. So it helps to have a little bit of a guideline on basically what I would tag someone or how we would tag someone. I was recently working with a client of ours, and the urge to tag everything appropriate. I have one particular contact in the system and there's 7 or 8 different tags. Well, that may actually make sense, on how we're going to do this. But what I don't want to do is have us get caught up in tags and what should I tag them. And if I don't know what to tag them, I'm not going to tag them at all. So we definitely don't want to get stuck there either. So I'm giving you a quick little guide on how we utilize tags and basically really what they're for, what the purpose of them, how we're going to use them in the future. So the first thing is tags are really meant to help isolate and identify people in the system. So if you think about, oh, I want to know who all my buyers are, I want to know who all my sellers are, or I want to know what marketing came in on this particular, or which leads came in on this particular property that I marketed, or what neighborhoods, or I have a new house available, or that's going to be listed 2-story, so I want to target all my 2-story people. I mean, if we have this data in the system, we can be super effective with how we market to them. But if we don't have that data, it doesn't necessarily mean your database isn't valuable. It just means we may not have quite the same opportunity. So just to kind of put it into perspective, there's a few different categories on how we look at tags. First and foremost, the contact type. I mean, are they a buyer? Are they a seller? Are they a renter, an investor? Here we have local or farm, meaning like someone that maybe is you're prospecting, so you know that they live somewhere, so you want to target them, but they're not a lead or anything yet. They've just signed up for some information, local information or something. And then of course business, our vendors, our contractors, the people that we work with and we want to keep in touch with. So that's one category here is the contact type. Another one would be a status. Where in that, if appropriate, where are they in that particular category? So status would be prospect. So are they a buyer prospect or a seller prospect, right? Like these could kind of fit for multiple contact types. So rather than having a prospective buyer, prospective seller, active seller, we break it up into 2 different categories so that they could match both. So in this case, we have prospect, we have a lead, so someone that we're pursuing, we've had maybe 2-way dialogue with, we're trying to move them in toward a transaction, but they're not necessarily working with us yet. They haven't signed a contract, or maybe we're not out showing properties. Then we move into actives. That's what active would be for. So of course, once we've closed them in the transaction process, we would consider them passed. Then we also have a status of VIP. So maybe you want to isolate your database into people that you have done business with. Maybe VIPs also are business friends of yours, but they're also considered VIPs. This might be for events or maybe gifts or something of that nature that you're going to do. And then of course we want to have dead if they're a dead lead. We can archive leads. A lot of times we like to still be able to see how many people have come in, and if they're dead, it's easy to look them up this way as well. All right, next we get into interests. So, this would be maybe particular neighborhoods. So depending on your area or your market, you may isolate people. We're out here in Las Vegas, so of course we appreciate your Las Vegas referrals. But we also have Henderson, Summerlin, Green Valley. So we're kind of segmented into certain areas out here. So I might put that if I know that someone's looking in a particular area, I want to go ahead and include that. So the tag itself wouldn't be neighborhoods, but it would be like neighborhood names, all the different neighborhood names that are appropriate. Then we might have price points. If you have under 100,000 or over 1 million, those types of things, it might be appropriate to identify people in certain price points, because again, we might want to look them up specifically. I want to isolate everybody that's between the $300,000 and $500,000 range because I have this house available and I want to market to them. Next would be property types, so or properties in particular, I should say. So maybe you ran a Facebook ad for a particular property that you have listed, and that has a certain set of criteria, whether it's a number of bedrooms and household, or I'm sorry, a number of bedrooms or price points or certain amenities. So if you have specific property addresses in here, well, then you could have, of course, that assigned to the lead that came in. And then things like home types, so single story, two-story, ranch style, that type of thing. Now, the contact type might be a buyer and a seller, for example, but usually they're one or the other first. We want to kind of like choose one to lead with. And I say that because this might play a role in campaigns as I finish up the conversation here. But so we kind of want to have like a default, but they could technically match both. They could be a buyer and a seller. Remember, this is more about how we're going to look them up and what we're going to do with them in a group, or how we're going to group them. So usually one will prevail over the other. Obviously, you could have a business friend that is also a buyer, or someone that you're working with. So you might make a choice here to actually have two separate contacts for that particular person. Maybe they have a different email address for their business versus their personal. So again, there are some instances where you might have two, but primarily you're going to kind of lead with one. Same with status. They're not really going to be both. They're not going to be a dead lead and an active lead at the same time. So the idea is that you might only have one of those. Whereas interests, they could be several. We know what neighborhood they're in, what price point they're in, certain type of house they're interested in. So there might be several different tags applied to this particular person. And again, the reason why that's appropriate is if we're going to market to someone who has a specific interest, it doesn't matter really what their other price points are offhand if they match a particular interest criteria. Next is timeline. Now, for those of us that like to really keep track of the database and maybe get an idea of our pipeline, it might be helpful for us to be able to isolate people in timeline. Now, what we don't want to do is say 6 months, 3 months, because when we do that, a lot of times we find that people don't actually update that. So here they have the 3-month tag on, but yet they're 2 months into it. Are they really 1 month away now, or are they still 3 months away? Right, so timeline might be better. We may even use timeline instead of dates and months. We might actually, or years and months. We might actually use it more for pre-qualified or not, or looking at houses, or kind of a level of interest. I know a lot of us might use things like ABC buyer or hotter lead cold or hotter lead or cold leads. Something like that. So really the idea of timeline is more around urgency, or how often we're communicating with them, or when they might be coming up, things like that. And remember, keep in mind, a lot of these tags will play a role into campaigns as we move forward with how to properly target our database here. So again, we don't want to have like a just say January, February, or March, because that could be, if I just said May, well, that could be this May or it could be next May, right? We have people in the database that are quite a ways out. So we want to have something a little more segmented. So we could say, well, they're interested in 2020 and they're looking around September, right? That kind of thing. So they might have multiple tags applied in this category as well. Then we have communication. So the idea here is, what type of communication do we want to have with them? What are they responding to? Are they using the app or not using the app? Things like that might be appropriate. So this would be more appropriate to, again, let's say they want text only. Well, if we have a campaign that has text and email, we can also build, and I'm sorry, when I say campaign, I mean smart plan. When we have a smart plan in the system that's attached to them, we could have a text only smart plan or an email only smart plan. We could actually get a lot more specific and have more specific interaction with them, which is ultimately the goal, is to communicate with them about what they want, how they want us to communicate it. Next, we might have events. So like open houses, client appreciation. These would be things, again, think invites, right? If I'm going to do something or I want to mark how someone is participating with me, whether they've attended, and this could just be attended. Maybe this isn't who you're inviting, because maybe I'm going to invite all buyers and sellers and all leads, that kind of thing. So these statuses over here might give us these categories might give us who I'm going to invite, whereas the events might be something that I'm keeping track of, like I said, more for participation. And maybe we call it, instead of events, we call it participation. So these category names don't actually exist in the system. It's just a way to kind of help you uh, organize maybe your thoughts on what we're going to tag people. And then lastly, we have the system tags. So the system itself, being the command, KW command system, already has tags in here. So the agent, talent, allied resource, buyer, seller, bought, sold. Now, personally, I don't really like using those like I don't necessarily call them the same way, like bought or sold. For me, it would be again a buyer, like a past buyer or a past seller, right? Like so I kind of would use the statuses, the categories in these tags a little bit different, more combined as opposed to just one-off tags. So that's really how it's up to you whether or not you want to utilize those, but they do exist in there already. So we don't necessarily want to create duplicates. As a matter of fact, it won't let us create a duplicate buyer. So you would need to name your buyer tag something different if you didn't want to mistake it for the one that's in the system. But otherwise, these are perfectly fine to use. They work very similar. So again, this is just a quick idea of some of the tags you might have in the system or you might want to create in the system. These up here, contact type, status, interest, timeline, this is just a way for us to categorize those tags, but there isn't tag categories in the system itself. So what I've done in my system, for example, is contact type. I have these tags are a certain color code, and then the status is a certain color code. So if I pop over here into mine, you'll actually see that active, dead, lead, past, prospect, those ones that are in gold in my system are the status. The ones that are in purple in my system are the contact type. So this is another way to kind of help. Maybe I want to make sure there's one of each color assigned to a particular contact. Things like that. So lots of different options here, guys. There is no like one size fits all, one right way for everybody. It's really about how you're going to utilize the information. But hopefully this gives you just a little bit of a direction on kind of how to best use tags, because ultimately the tags are how we're going to isolate our people. So again, if I go to contacts and I did a search in the database, I can search by tags, and that's how I want to isolate everything else. And the last step here, really, and where tags come into play, is in our smart plans. So in the smart plans that we can set up here, we actually have the ability to, if this tag or when this tag is applied, trigger this smart plan. So that's extremely valuable to us, because if I mark them as a buyer, then I could have a buyer campaign going. Or if I mark them as a VIP, then I could have them on a certain call pattern or something like that. So lots of different ways to use the tag. So I want you to kind of understand, here's what the purpose of the tags are. Here's a tag, a structure, a naming structure that might work. And then ultimately, thinking about how they're going to be used in the system is how we can determine finally for ourselves how we want to utilize those. So if you need any help with those, by all means, please reach out. It's kind of still a little bit of a confusing topic for a lot. It's hard to wrap our head around sometimes if you're not already organized or detail oriented or something, but we don't want that to hold you up. So hopefully this will give you at least a little bit of an idea on how to get started with those, and basically where you can go with those, how we can use them, and we start actively getting our contacts tagged in the system. So again, any help, please reach out, team@ballenbrands.com. We're at your command, and you could go to understandingcommand.com. We have lots of resources available for you.